Hi, this is Rachel from 7 and All, and today, as you can see, I have a special guest joining me. If you are newer to this channel, this is my mom, who is really amazing when she comes on once in a while to film a special video with me. She is a veteran homeschooler with many homeschool graduates at this point. I think we're up to 7 now? Seven official homeschool graduates, homeschooled preschool through high school.
Yay!
Decades of homeschool experience. And today she is joining me to have a conversation about what is your response when someone comes to you or comments on your content saying, well, I knew homeschooled students who were so behind in math, or I had experience with formerly homeschooled students who couldn't write a paragraph. I have experience with formerly homeschooled students who couldn't follow directions, who couldn't manage their time well, who couldn't get assignments turned in on the deadline. You know, fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. And we have all heard this, likely if you've been in the homeschool world, you've heard this type of objection many times. But I have experience with homeschoolers who failed in some particular way. That my initial response is, I believe you. I know them too. How about you?
I know a few myself.
Having been in the homeschool community for decades, we probably actually know a few more than most people have run into because we have been in homeschool for such a long time. Now, here are the two things that I do not do when I get this sort of objection or argument against homeschool. Number one, I do not go on the defense. This, to me, does not feel like an occasion to get on my shining armor and defend the honor of homeschool and say, no, homeschooling is the best. No, I don't feel the need to go on defense when this idea is suggested to me. And on the second hand, I also do not feel crushed or dismayed or like I need to rethink all my choices of choosing homeschool as a lifestyle. I don't start second guessing my decision to homeschool just because somebody knows some situations in which homeschool failed. Now, what do? I do use this information to inform myself of the seriousness of the endeavor that I have taken on. And that's where I wanted to invite you to talk a little bit about this. So homeschool does fail. There are situations in which you can look at someone who's gone through a homeschool experience and they're not happy with the outcome of their education, or their parents are not happy, or society at large thinks, wow, you didn't get a good education.
Right. And I think the homeschool community needs to be open to the concept of educational neglect. Mm-hmm. And it happens. And because it happens, we need to build our own awareness. What is educational neglect? How does it happen? Whose fault is it? And what can be done? So some things as homeschoolers we need to be aware of is the importance of consistency, the importance of really timing transitions out of a curriculum, transitions such as a move. What does that do to a child's education? And how many transitions can a child absorb during their educational life? There are many, many things that can happen during education that really impacts the life of a child. And as homeschoolers, are we aware of those things? Are we planning for those things? And how do we respond as a community when we see neglect happening right in front of us? Can we have those grown-up conversations where we gently provide an opportunity to look critically at a situation where it looks like it's not going well? Mm-hmm. And there's a teacher who's doing educational neglect possibly, but there's also a student. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's not the teacher that's neglecting the education, it's the student themselves. Mm-hmm. And how do we bring in some conversation into the life of the student that says, it's going to have lifelong consequences that you are neglecting your education. You are not cooperating with the educational process. And this happens in homeschool.
So we really want to bring into the conversation the idea of individual responsibility. And I feel like it's easier for people to accept the idea that there is individual responsibility on the part of the teacher, which in homeschool is the parent, but in traditional education, there is individual responsibility on the part of the teacher. There's individual responsibility on the part of the parent. There's also individual responsibility on the part of the student. Now, we do cut students more slack in that because they are kids, they are less mature, they're on a growing process, but are they? Are they growing in maturity? So that's also something we need to be aware of. So bring individual responsibility into your conversation when it comes to education and homeschool.
Right, because is it really a situation where a child was not taught they were supposed to read directions? Or is a child refusing to own the responsibility to read directions? So many times what we're actually dealing with is not that someone was not taught, they didn't have a good example, they never had a chance. It's just sheer they're not going to do their role in the learning process. And that happens in real schools, it happens in homeschools. And it is an issue, it is a problem, needs to be addressed, but to blanketly say, oh, it's because you're homeschooled, I think that's not a fair
Yes.
argument.
I think because homeschool is a relatively rare life choice, people like to just, it's kind of an easy target. Oh, it's because you're homeschooled. Anything that's wrong with your child, they just target it, pin it on the easy victim of homeschool. I've had said to me as an adult, as a mother, with small children, oh, you're not really into sports and you're pretty bad at sports because you're homeschooled. And I'm like, excuse me, this is my child's birthday party. Have I ever given the impression that I really wanted to be good at sports, but man, I was homeschooled, so I just couldn't be good at sports? No, I have zero interest in being good at sports myself, but I also believe if I had wanted to, I probably could have been athletic if I'd had interest and talent and motivation and didn't want to just sit around reading books all day. But I don't blame homeschool. I take responsibility. I have never put any effort into being athletically talented. So I take responsibility for that, and I don't point the finger at homeschool. So here we're talking about this kind of hypothetical example of someone saying, well, I knew a homeschooler who couldn't write a paragraph. But what if we bring this into a real life situation of what if you notice that your child does not seem to be able to write a paragraph? What do you do if you notice that your child is growing behind in math and it's not due to legitimate needs, or they're not actually progressing? Because people could be behind, but they're progressing. And that's one situation. But people could be behind, children could be behind and they're not progressing. What can you do?
So the number one thing I would check is consistency. So consistency, are you giving it a daily attention to progress in this area? And if we're giving it daily consistency, I would actually do 2 times a day. So I would have a session of math in the morning.
Struggle areas.
Yep. And a session in the afternoon. And then if we're failing to see progress with consistent attention twice a day, I would probably bring in a tutor. So
because you want skilled consistency.
yes.
And you may be a skilled teacher already. You may need to grow in your own skills of bringing in techniques of teaching. A lot of homeschool parents aren't starting from a place with a whole lot of educational skills, but you can grow. So you can grow, and you can also, like she said, bring in a tutor, bring in someone who is skilled in a particular
in an area.
Yeah.
And homeschooling doesn't mean don't ever bring in an expert educator in a certain situation. And sometimes it does just take a little bit of a breakthrough. It doesn't take that long to learn how to write a paper.
No.
If you had a cooperative student and a good some good guidance, at tops a month. you can learn how to write a pretty decent paper.
It's actually much simpler than people make it seem.
Yeah. So sometimes it's just you need to bring some focused attention to, can you name the problem, and then can you dedicate some time and attention to solving that specific problem. But if you're dealing with someone who's their internal value system is, I don't try, I don't work hard, I don't focus on my education, and that's a bigger problem than you can't write a paper, then you can't do your times tables. Usually the real problem is not that specific small ability, because getting that small ability usually is not an issue. It's the backup, what am I bringing to the table as a student? Am I curious? Am I bringing, am I bringing my game? Am I actually doing the work? And when the answer to that question is no, that's a whole different set of activities, because you have to address a heart condition instead of a skill. And that's
actually much harder.
Oh, yes.
And a much longer journey.
But you can't tutor that.
But it's a journey worth taking, because that will have a huge impact on your child throughout their life. So that's a hard journey and not very fun journey, but very much worth taking, is to address the heart condition and to address the worldview to the point where they can say, I have individual agency and I have individual responsibility when it comes to my education. Not to have this false idea that it's my mom's or it's my teacher's idea to stuff knowledge into my head. That's not how education works. But I, as a child, I play a key role in my experience with learning. And I have to bring my ability to learn to the table. I have to bring my attitudes and my responsibility to the table. And if I do that, I will make progress. And if I don't, I won't. Now I want to start wrapping up this video by actually talking about the flaws in this as an argument against homeschool. So people are using this anecdote of, I or my husband or my mom or my aunt or my professor knew these homeschoolers who were woefully under-equipped to do whatever, fill in the blank. We knew these homeschoolers who couldn't write papers, who couldn't do math, who had no social skills, who couldn't play sports, whatever it is, fill in the blank. I want to address the flaws in that as an argument against homeschooling, because here's the concept. Anecdotes do not equal arguments. And this is something that I went over again and again with all of my writing students that I have had, because there's just something about teenagers that want to use anecdotes as arguments in their papers, and they don't qualify. You cannot use personal anecdotes as arguments.
And so one of the concepts is causation. So one of the reasons why you can't use an anecdote as a reason is because you cannot prove causation. So is it true that homeschool causes you not to start a sentence with a capital letter or end it with a period? It doesn't. So we have to be looking for root causes, and do they only exist in certain environments? And when it proves false, then the argument is false.
So actually anybody could have an anecdote about a child who did not receive a good education in some way from any form of education or any type of school anywhere. Like, they exist. Do you know why? Because the human experience is very wide and broad, and actually I think we need to let go of this idea that all kids should be good at every single thing in every sphere of life, and we should attribute it all to the way that they were educated. There are so many logical fallacies within that. We're not going to dive into that. We do need to let go of that idea that every child is going to turn out amazing in every sphere of life because they're mine. We got to let go of that. And in addition, we need to remember that we as homeschoolers don't need to defend, and we are not held responsible for the outcome of every other homeschool and every other homeschooled student. In exactly the same way that if I were a public school teacher or a private school teacher, I would not be held responsible for the outcome of every public schooled or every private schooled student in existence everywhere like that. That sounds utterly ridiculous, right? So we should not apply the same logic to a homeschool parent. You know who you are responsible for? Like your family and your students. You should take that role very seriously. And that is something I will always communicate on this channel, that yes, we should be pushing ourselves. We should be educating ourselves on how to do homeschool skillfully and effectively. But you should also remember, you are only one responsible person in your homeschool. You are only one factor of agency. There are also the students themselves, your children. They also have agency, and they also play a responsible role in your homeschool. You cannot mold your homeschool in your own image. They will bring their own personalities, their own worldviews and values to bear. And so we should be very aware of what those values and worldviews are.
Yeah, and doing our best to communicate what they bring to the table, what the student is contributing to their education is invaluable. And we cannot eat their food for them. No matter how much we love them, they have to swallow themselves. And to have a child who actually understands, I am the one who contributes the most to my learning. And guiding them in that process of how, swallow, that's on you. And it's not even sad. It's not even a terrible thought to think that as a student, I am the big contributor to who actually learns here.
It's part of their design. It's part of how they were created, and it's actually amazing. Just getting some students to the point of realizing that it's amazing can be a tough but worthwhile journey. So yes, I am actually very, very passionate about the idea that we should neither let amazing success stories, individual amazing success stories, that this student was so successful, they got all these scholarships, they have an amazing life after homeschool. We shouldn't let those success stories or the individual kind of failure stories or underachieving stories, we shouldn't let either of those types of stories bolster up our own philosophies and ideas of how education should be done, because those are the stories that belong to the student.
Yeah.
And they really should not be used as evidence to support whatever we believe and whatever we want to do, that, hey, this kid turned out amazing, so therefore my approach to homeschool is amazing. Be a little more humble and be a little more aware of the impact of that student in their own journey. I think that the student actually plays a larger role than we might sometimes want to believe as the parents or the students and directors of that education. The student plays a big role. All right, I hope that this got your gears turning, got you thinking about how you can respond to this type of objection in your homeschool life. And we'll be seeing you next time for more nerdy homeschool videos. See you. Bye.
Bye.